So a couple videos we talked about pain body and the psyche that the ego that we are really battling against, as far as that voice, all those voices that circulate through our heads and suggest and try to basically brainwash us with a false identity, an illusion of who we actually are. And those are those kinds of thoughts, that ego, that psyche, that all that pain, that accumulation of pain and personal likes and dislikes and preferences that have built up in us over time, are really the source of, I think, almost all of our problems. Because we are what we think. And if our thoughts are always disturbing, we will be disturbed. If they're always depressing, we will be depressed. If they're always angry, we will be angry, so on and so forth. So, we talked in the last video, or I talked in the last video, about practical ways of kind of sidetracking those thoughts with being present in the moment, either externally present with the practice of mindfulness, or internally present with the practice of basically meditation, focusing on your breaths, your feelings inside of you, etc. My little dog's being so cute today. He's just sitting so nice, so calm. You've seen him all crazy in some past videos. He's being super cool right now. So calm, buddy. Good boy. Yeah. So today I want to talk about that, just understanding your own pain body is really helpful. But there's kind of a side benefit in understanding the pain body, in that you can start to realize that every person in the world around you has their own pain body, and they're struggling with that pain body in their own personal way. And a lot of people are really living almost completely out of that pain body. They're living most of their life ego-centered, living their lives based on all those crazy thoughts. So they live lives full of self-protection, full of fear, full of anxiety, full of pain, full of rage, and that is always flowing out of them. And so when you are interacting with these people, they can be very difficult to deal with. Or even sometimes the people who aren't always difficult to deal with have a moment where they become extremely, something hits them and they get out of control, or they snap, or they make a threat, or they just, it's not like them, but it manifests. So when you realize that everybody's kind of struggling with their pain body to some extent, some are full-blown living it out, some are trying to live more conscious and awake or aware lives, but yet they have their moments as well, myself included. But it really is helpful to realize that what you see, for the most part, when it comes to seeing other people who are living in their ego, is not really who they are either. Just as you are not really your thoughts or your ego or your psyche. That's just an illusion, an identity that you've created. So, when the person in front of you cuts you off in traffic, it's helpful to realize he didn't do it. His ego did it. Or he just didn't intend to. Maybe he didn't see you. Could be a few different things. But sometimes just realizing that people are not what they seem is helpful. The person who I told you that story about that nurse who kind of, I was going through like that crisis at work and I needed that number, and she made like a snarky comment, right? Well, it really was helpful for me at that moment to realize, even though that nurse seemed like a total B, she really isn't. Deep down inside is a person who is love. The oneness of the universe is love. Her ego might have acted in a way that was snarky or bitchy, but that's what the ego does. And so just realize that that's the ego, not that person. That kind of helps in those situations, to be able to disidentify another person from their pain body, just as you disidentify yourself from your own. We are not our crazy thoughts. We are not our madness. We are not the roommate that can't be kicked out. That's just the ego. That's just the psyche. That's just the pain body. That's just an accumulation of illusions that the ego tries to grab onto to form some kind of an identity outside of itself that isn't true. When in reality, when you look deep down inside to the heart, to your heart, you don't see all those things. You see purity, you see love, you see kindness, you see gentleness. And that's really where we all want to learn to live from, versus living from our egos. So the more we can practice disidentifying from the ego thoughts, the more room there is for the soul to emerge, for the truth of who we are to manifest itself. That's consciousness. That really is enlightenment. So I want to talk more about that place in the next video. I'm hoping tomorrow that will be the subject. And I've got this, I just noticed this book sitting right here, The Alchemist. And this is like a graphic novel version, which is pretty cool. So it's like comic book form, but it's the full version of the book, and it's got some really interesting things to say about our journey. So maybe we'll talk about that tomorrow as well, as I'm talking about the soul and the truth. So for today, just to stay on topic, just realizing that, start practicing looking at people and start noticing the things that they do, that, that are ego-based, I guess you could say. You'll start to notice people feel a certain need to constantly complain. They feel a certain need to talk about how sick they are, or how they're just not doing well, or they're so tired, or this or that. There's a lot of negativity that has to be discussed for some reason. Other people are always angry, and they're talking about this or that, or what this other person did to them, or other people are, they want you to feel sorry for them, so they're telling you how miserable it is, how unfair this thing was, so on and so forth. And it just kind of goes on and on and on. Some people are, people. Just look around at the people and look at all this negativity and look at all this sadness and depression, and then recognize all of that comes straight from pain and fear. It's all just an accumulation of people's experiences over time that they're harboring and holding on to and then kind of mulling over constantly because that's the only identity that they're aware of within themselves, and it's a false identity. We're not those people. Those experiences have come and gone, long gone sometimes. Some people are living so far in the past from pain that happened years and decades ago, and they just keep snowballing more and more and more onto this thing, and it becomes this big ugly mass of ego. And then that's just how they are, or so they say. Well, I mean, that's just me, that's just who I am. But it really isn't who they are. It isn't at all who they are. It's just what they have identified. That's the identity that they have decided to accept or to claim. So all of these ego-based false identities swarming around us in the form of human beings, where deep inside we all truly are a completely different conscious version of ourselves that oftentimes is just so sealed up, so unmanifested inside of us that we rarely see it. And when we do, Oprah talks about it or whatever, I don't know. But it's really something that could be happening all the time. People could be awakening to learning to disidentify from the false identity and learning to live in the true identity of the soul or the heart, that place of love, which tomorrow we'll get into much more deeply, is really a place of divinity. It's the place where Great Spirit resides. It's the place of almost a supernatural, not of this world, yet of this world existence. And yeah, so we'll talk about that tomorrow. Anyway, so what is this, part 4 of like the depression series? So 1, we were talking about our thoughts and how we are not those thoughts. And then 2, what were we talking about? I don't even remember. Just go back to the videos. But we talked about learning to practical ways of being in the present. Now we're talking about the ego in others, identifying the psyche and pain body in others and its importance. Tomorrow we'll talk about divinity. Could you say holiness, spirituality, all those things kind of come from that true place in our hearts, in our cores. So, enough for today. Hopefully you're putting all of these things together in one package and practicing being present and mindful, maybe meditating, being aware of your thoughts and your ego, and separating yourself from the madness in a moment by moment, day by day, week by week way. That's how we practice, that's how we get stronger, that's how, honestly, it is helping. I almost hesitate to say it's curing my depression, but I really feel like I'm not struggling with it this year. I mean, I might have some thoughts come into my mind, but then I just let them go. And it's been really, really helpful. So I hope that you can take this and use it practically for yourself as well, whether you're struggling with depression, anger, like self-consciousness, low self-esteem, hatred toward yourself, body issues, almost anything, any form of negativity or anger or fear or anything that doesn't belong there, you can use this to practice letting those thoughts go and realizing that you are not those things and that isn't you. And understanding where that comes from has really been helpful for me, and I hope it will be for you. Let me know.